Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Maggie Kraft, Executive Director, Area 1 Agency on Aging. And now here's your host, Paul Bressoud.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm your host, Paul Bressoud. Today we're here with Maggie Kraft, the Executive Director of the Area 1 Agency on Aging.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks
Great.
for having me.
You're right. Yeah. And so, the question I always ask folks at the start is about what they do in their job. So what does the Executive Director of the Area 1 Agency on Aging do?
Oh, a lot of people want to know that.
That's why you're here.
and then I think a lot of people don't care about that so much. They
will.
They really care more about what our services are,
right.
and so less so what I do, but more about what our agency and our staff do. And what we do is we provide some really important direct services to older adults, and I can tell you about those a little bit. But we also are mandated through the Older Americans Act to be the area agency for Humboldt and Del Norte counties, bringing federal dollars through that act, through the state of California, into these two counties and making sure that money gets spent to help support older adults.
So let me ask this question. It's fascinating what you just said. The Older Americans Act. So are there agencies that are all around the United States that are bringing in federal dollars to help aging populations?
Absolutely. The Area Agency on Aging system was put together through the Older Americans Act, which was signed in 1965. Area agencies started 50 years ago, so a little while after that, and our area agency has been in business for 43 years, since 1980. So the beauty of it is that the federal government designed years back, they said, okay, we need to get money to low-income, poor older adults who are really struggling in local communities, and we're not going to go into each community and tell them all what to do. We're going to set up a system that we appropriate the money goes out and is distributed out throughout the country based on a funding formula, which nobody wants to hear about exactly, but it gets money out to the communities, and each state unit on aging at the state level puts match money into that. Some of that funding has to be matched by state government, and then they pass it along. So you can say, well, all those hands touching the money. But if we were having to have our local nutrition programs contract directly with the federal government, it would be a nightmare. So by bringing the money local, we can have local relationships and local contracts. So we get the money here locally for those two counties, and we use it the way it was mandated to be used. And there's parameters that we can't, I always say, if you want a lifeguard on the Eel River, we can't pay for that. But if we need nutrition programs, we fund nutrition, legal services, programs for caregivers, access services like finding information, transportation, health promotion activities, caregiver, I said that probably, but caregiver is really important, services. So the money's all kind of siloed into those categories. And then what we do locally is we say, okay, what does the local community need? We don't want someone in Washington or Sacramento saying, you have to exactly do it this way. So the idea behind it was local community makes decisions.
So even though the funds are categorical, let's say for a nutrition program, and you have to spend the money on the nutrition program, you get to decide what the nutrition program looks like.
Well, and that's where this notion, the notion of let communities decide, kind of slams into the notion of bureaucracy, which is not really a notion, it's actually anyway, whatever it is. But so there's very stringent kind of rules about what you have to follow to do that. But generally speaking, if the nutrition programs follow the rules, which they do, the ones we contract with, then they can provide the meals according to the guidance. So for meals, there's two categories right now. There's what's called home delivered meals and what they call congregate meals. Home delivered meals are designed for people who cannot safely or efficiently or regularly get out to get food for themselves or go shopping or to a restaurant or anything like that, or even come to the congregate site. So those folks get assessed for their medical needs, their physical ability to get out, and then if they qualify, they get meals delivered to them. Otherwise, the congregate sites are open to anyone 60 plus, and people go to those sites and have their meal there in a social environment with other people.
Is transportation also provided to those sites if meals are served at a certain time, say every day?
Not by our providers. That's tricky in a rural area. Not by our providers. Most of the people who come are coming themselves, which can provide cause problems because, and we learned something with COVID. What we learned with COVID is there were people who, when COVID happened and shut down the sites, what those sites did is start providing what we call to-go meals. So people would drive up, they'd be handed their meals, they'd get a little bit of check-in with the staff, and then off they would go. And what that provided was the ability for, let's say, me to come from Rio Dell to Fortuna to pick up my meals, but I could also pick up my neighbor's meals.
Right.
So instead of all of us getting in a car and driving to Fortuna, which is the closest meal site for those meals, I can pick them up for my friends. And what we found in rural areas, that's huge, because why would you make 10 people drive 5 times a day for a daily meal when you could have one person go maybe, and during COVID, they'd pick up a week's worth of meals for all their people? How efficient is that? The federal government needs to change the law before we can permanently create that kind of system, because they say you have a home delivered meal or you have a congregate dining meal. And the idea with that is, I personally think it's kind of paternalistic. The government in 1965 telling the older adults of 2023 that the best way for you to eat your meals with other people. It might be the best way is for you to go, to a site and eat with other people and socialize with them. The best way might be for you to be sure you get a meal. And so we're grappling with what do we do post-COVID in terms of those regulations and those laws, do they fit 2023? And so what we'd like to see is some more recognition that people have their own communities sometimes, and that Rio Dell is a great example. That group of people, it might make more sense for them to pick up the meals and go sit in Rio Dell at the
Right.
Resource Community Center there and have their meals together there, but not have all 10 of them drive every day to get those meals. So
Why couldn't you just make that the in-home delivery?
Because
the Rio Dell Community Center.
Because the in-home delivery definition is that you cannot leave your home. Generally speaking, you can't. It's really designed for It's designed for people who are really frail, less so for people who economically cannot afford the gas to go day after day. So we have to look at the 2023 world we live in and say there's more issues that impact people getting food and people safely getting food and consistently getting food. So, but as it stands now, these providers are providing, they've done a great job during COVID. They were delivering meals to people, whoever they needed to. They were doing the to-go meals, and they worked so hard to make sure people were still being fed.
Well, I agree 100% with you that the 2023 world, 1965 world, are two different worlds. I will say one thing that amazes me. A 1965 Great Society Lyndon Johnson program still exists with the things that have been cut. That's pretty amazing, and hopefully you're able to streamline it. What other services are provided beyond the meals from the Area 1 agency?
Well, I just want to say the meals are provided by our subcontractors. So we don't actually provide meals. This is one of the roles of the area agency, is to subcontract out services that we don't provide ourselves.
And those are local
we
subcontractors?
subcontract with this Humboldt Senior Resource Center, and we subcontract with the Del Norte Senior Center, excuse me, and they provide meals in those communities. The challenge with a rural setting like ours, remember I said they divide the money interstate funding formula. It's based primarily on population. So we're a rural community. We will never get the money they get in a larger community. So the amount of money we have to subcontract out for meals is pretty low. We could give little bits of money to a lot of different senior nutrition services. But they would have to follow so many rules to get our money. That's where the bureaucracy comes in, that it wouldn't be worth their time. So in the past, before inflation has hit this money, it hasn't been increasing to keep up with population needs or inflation. So, but in the past, we had a couple other subcontractors, but the amount of money they were getting that never really went up was not efficient for them anymore to have to follow the rules that we have. And these aren't rules that are like, we're not making them do things that don't make sense, but they have to have a registered dietitian on staff or in contract, and we don't have a lot of those around. There's a lot of different things that just made for some of them say, your $15,000 isn't enough for us.
Is there a way to advocate for those changes? Is that something that the area groups on aging do?
Oh yeah. We do this nationally. We have a national association called U.S. Aging. We also have a statewide association, the California Association of Area Agencies on Aging. And one of the things we've done in the last few years is actually greatly been able to advocate to greatly increase funding coming to some of these programs. The Governor Newsom, he rolled out the Master Plan on Aging 2 years ago, and in there are some specific goals and objectives and strategies for trying to recognizing that our population of older adults is growing at a much greater pace than any other age population, and that if we're going to be ready as a state, as a country, even as a local community, we have to be better organized in terms of all the services and what we're doing. And so within that Master Plan on Aging, we have a forum to say, okay, this was decided by a lot of really smart people that these are the things we need. How are we going to go about and get them? And so our association put forth some legislation last year to bring additional money in to the nutrition program and to some of the other programs. And that money is going to be critical because all the COVID money, relief money we got to just give meals to everybody. I mean, the idea was seniors, not just our meal program recipients, but any senior who used to go out to eat, who used to go to the grocery store, they may not be doing that during COVID, so we need to give them some meals. So all that money is sunsetting, it's being spent, and COVID, the public health emergency is over. So we've been working to start bringing more money in from the state so that we don't have what they call a meal cliff or a nutrition program cliff, that all of a sudden these people aren't getting the meals. Challenge, of course, is the state budget is it's not looking as sweet as it did 2 years ago when all that COVID funding was coming in. But we do have money that will continue these services and that will help our subcontractors manage the shift from not having that COVID resource anymore to not only a little less money, but opening up their sites again for people to come in and have meals and have that interaction and the different classes that these facilities offer.
Are there sites that still haven't opened?
They are mostly opening up now. The ones that we subcontract with, one of the things we did is we got some money for infrastructure repairs and through the state Master Plan on Aging. And so we've been able to give some of these sites money to fix their buildings a little bit and bring in new equipment and things because they never have that money. So you can't expect someone to run a nutrition program year after year and use all this equipment and not allow them to use or have some money somewhere to help fix things or replace things when they go bad. So we've been able to do that.
It seems like a head scratcher to me that, you were talking about a program that was signed in a couple of years ago to give services to an aging population. I mean, this didn't sneak up on anybody. The advanced aging of the baby boomers was not a secret, right? I mean, the baby boomers were a influential group no matter what age they were, but now as an aging population, this couldn't have snuck up on anybody.
No, and I think, and there have over, since 65, there's always been efforts and attempts and work to increase the funding, but it's the funding on the federal level comes out of the pot of money that's, it's not the defense money, it's all the other pot.
Right.
And so you have a lot of needs in our world, in our country that you have a lot of different people advocating for. And that's where that's where sometimes thinking about ageism is kind of fits in well to that thought process, because even though many of our Congress people are of a certain age, they're not using these services. They're not ever, most of the people in Congress right now will not need a free lunch.
They get a lot of them.
They get it, yeah. And I wasn't going to go there, but it's okay. So even though their constituents, generally speaking, older people vote more, and older people, are their constituents. A lot of those people aren't necessarily the people most in need who are saying, oh yeah, we need more free meals, or we need to help the poor older population. And this legislation was initially designed recognizing that back in '65, they were seeing extreme poverty in some older adults, and they weren't living to 80 and 90. They were dying, and it was really designed for the lowest income folks, but they set it up to say, we won't turn any older adult away. 60 plus, you get the service. So there's a lot of rubs and conflicting kind of thought in this, but essentially, we have not kept up with it. And there are people who think, well, older adults, they don't, they've taken everything, or they've gotten everything, or if you think of the isms.
Well, I want you to explain ageism.
Okay. So, any ism is about making a judgment about someone else based on their age, whether they're too old or too young. I mean, we have ageism that is against younger people, that basically, instead of getting to know them and valuing them for who they are, we judge them based on their age. So we judge sexism, we judge people based on their gender, we judge racism, we judge people based on the color of their skin. So with ageism and it's inherent in the decision. I mean, this is my bias. I don't color my hair. I don't either. Yeah, no, if you do, it looks really nice either way. But that we receive from very young age this kind of push that says, getting old is bad. Color your hair, make your wrinkles go away. You got to look young, and we, even as we age, we take that in. We carry it on. We have internalized ageism, so we don't always call it out. Birthday cards that say, oh, you're 30, you're over the hill,
right.
Or you're 40, you're over the hill, or whatever. It's like, no, you're 30, that's wonderful. You're 40, whatever. So there's not a lot of negativity, a lot of judgment. And I think when COVID hit, and it started in nursing homes, where our most vulnerable older adults were living, and who depended on other people for care more than any other population of older adults. And, you were hearing people, oh, God, at least it's only in nursing homes.
Right.
And that ended up not being true, by the way, but if it was true, what are you saying when you say that statement? Well, at least it's only in nursing homes. Those people are expendable.
Right.
If we had said, oh, it's at least only in kindergartens,
right.
Nobody would have, that would have been a weird thing to say out loud to people. God, well, it's only killing babies. And so we all have it. I'm not putting this out like saying other people do this and I don't. We have this inherent need to categorize and judge people based on superficial reasons. And ageism is just another one of those things we do. And the other thing we do with ageism is we make an assumption that older people don't have done everything they need to do, or we need to do. I'm 61 now. Done everything we need to do. We have nothing to offer. There's no intelligence left there, whatever. And that's just blatantly untrue. Right. Unless, of course, we go back to Congress again. But that was a joke. You might want to cut that.
No, I'll laugh and then I'll. So when you're talking about ageism, when you're making people aware, mm-hmm. There was a part of your website that was called Old School.
Yeah.
Now, is that to go ahead and to make us aware of this, or help us fend it off so that we
Yeah.
don't, incorporate some of it ourselves? Or
So
what is
what-
old school?
So what Old School is, that is actually a link to a website that's called Old School. It was started by a woman named Ashton Applewhite, who is she's internationally known now for speaking up about the issues of ageism and ableism and just having us question our assumptions. And so that website that we link to gives a lot of information about how to combat ageism. We had a call recently, somebody, having trouble with her employer because of her age and wanted to know what resources might be available. I personally have a friend who's a year older than me who works in the software industry, was laid off and cannot get a job. It's not because she's not competent. So I work in a field where we have staff who are in their 70s and 80s. So when you work in the field of aging, rarely do you come up against that aging out kind of attitude about employment. But when you work in other fields, there's a lot of ageism in terms of, people getting the golden handshake at some point, or they don't want to pay them as much. They can bring in someone younger. There's all that stuff, and that's kind of out of my personal experience. But I know people who are dealing with that.
You think the ageism just translates into discrimination against people that are?
Oh yeah, it is
are
a form.
senior citizens?
It definitely is a form of discrimination, and it is a protected. It is a protected class, but to prove you're not being hired because of ageism might be a little harder, but it is a protected group. And we saw that with COVID because a lot of people who were in the workplace who were older were being told, you got to step back, you got to protect yourself. If they had some health issue, and we didn't know how it was going to, all we saw were people were dying. So people stepped back, and some of those jobs maybe weren't available for them when they went back. And also some of the older people that we see working in service jobs couldn't afford to step back, who work at the grocery stores or whatever. And so they were put, those first line responders, so they were put at more risk. But so we do see changes. They've done some recent, what the group, I'll have to get you the name of a group. I get so much stuff flying into my email. I'm like, who opened the door on this? But that have looked at how many people have retired before they had planned to, and primarily due to COVID. And then those folks that are like, but this doesn't work. I can't afford to retire now with the inflation things going on. So there's a lot of struggle going on for a lot of people who.
And these people are trying to get back into the workforce?
Some may not be able to physically do it. Some may not have the skills to go into the jobs that are out there now.
Some of those jobs don't exist anymore.
Some of the jobs don't exist. I mean, it's a big change. And, a very small percentage of adults in this country have saved up enough to retire. So that's the other thing. One of the other things we at the area agency, we work with caregivers, family caregivers, who very often have had to step back from their work because they're caring for somebody with Alzheimer's or another illness and are the policies that a lot of organizations have for family medical leave. I mean, there's strong stuff on the books, but not every company has to provide all those benefits. It really depends on the size of your company and.
Right.
So what we see with caregivers is a lot of them have to step back from their employment, which impacts their Social Security and their retirement earnings later in life. So not having a system in our society that we help support families caring for each other and people as we're aging, it impacts generationally. It impacts everybody.
Let's talk about a more contemporary problem, especially here in Humboldt County, housing.
Yeah.
I saw that you've started a program called the House Share Program. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's North Coast Home Share, and what we are doing, we didn't invent the concept, but we have brought it here locally, which is to find people who have housing, who have an empty room in their house, a couple rooms, they're in their family home, they don't want to move, kids have moved out, renting a room to somebody who cannot afford our housing prices otherwise. So they rent a room to somebody, the average rent might be $400 a month. They might get some services, in exchange, but mostly it's a room rental. And we match people up. We have them fill out applications. We do background checks. We do interviews. and we have them meet and give it a trial run. And what we're trying to do is say, well, we can't build hundreds of houses tomorrow here, but there are hundreds of houses here right now that have a lot of empty bedrooms in them. And let's not make those older folks move out of those homes. Let's bring someone in for that social connection, the financing, the safety. There's a lot of aspects to that program that really make it make sense.
And is it working?
Yes, it is. Yes, for the first time, right now we have more homeowners looking for roommates and people to join them in their homes, and we've had roommates looking. So this is great because there's always more people who need housing than people willing to open their doors. So we always need more people willing to rent a room, and we invite people to call us and talk to Julie there at our organization. It's a really nice way to also keep your house. If you're having trouble making repairs financially, you own it outright, don't want to take a loan up against it. It's a way to help, ease some of the burden for you financially as well.
And that's about all the time we have for today on Community Voices. I want to thank Maggie Kraft, the Executive Director of the Area 1 Agency on Aging. This is Paul Bressoud saying thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Community Voices. If you represent a nonprofit that is interested in being a guest on Community Voices, email info@accesshumboldt.net. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.